Thank you for joining us for another mastermind. And I'm going to take a minute to get this on Facebook, but I want to welcome Jennifer Woodson to our panel today. She's our featured guest, and we're going to be talking about how to validate your sustainability claims, which I think is such a cool topic. And, you know, it's like everybody wants to be sustainable, but how is is the big question. So yes, I'm really excited to learn more. And so let's go around and introduce everybody. My name's Melissa Shea, the CEO and co-founder of Fashion Mingle. Dee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Melissa. Hi, ladies. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Dee.
My name is Dee. I am the CEO of DCG Media Group in New York City. And so we work with all types of lifestyle brands, helping them and placing them in the map.
Awesome. And Dee's also got a lot of stuff going on with Hampton's Fashion Week and Times Square Fashion Week. Was just talking to a designer today that might be interested in Hampton. So hopefully I'll be able to send that over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Shireen, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to?
Thanks, Melissa. Hi, ladies. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is Shireen. I am the founder and principal attorney at Rockamova Law. We help your business from start to finish, set up the foundation for the successful growth and expansion of your brand. I am currently, one of the many projects I'm working on, actually, Kat has been assisting me on this as well. We are wrapping up filming for a really exciting fashion documentary this weekend, and stay tuned for more information on that. So that's going to be coming out hopefully in the summertime, actually in a few months, but that's exciting. And, you know, yeah, just keeping busy. It's been a very busy few months. And I love seeing that, because I know that obviously after what happened last year with the pandemic, businesses are back and they are ready to get things going. And I'm so happy to be working with them again.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of energy in the air and a lot of excitement about the summer and getting back to normal. Catherine, want to introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to? I know you've got a million things going on.
Yeah, we're gonna fill up the hour with that. No, I'm really excited to get back in the saddle, and it feels like a real resurgence and rebirth in New York. I've been there at least 4 times this week, which was great. And I think one of my companies is Runway The Real Way, and it's a fashion brunch. And I think I found a place for it. It's a restaurant, and he used to be the president of Joseph Abood, and he has this restaurant. So he's a fashion person. So he's like, I want to work really closely with you with the designers. And so I'm excited about that. And Jackson Sturkey is my writing partner and musical kind of friend and mentee. And we're doing a gig on Saturday night. And so I'm going to get to play violin at a cabaret. So he's going to handle all the cabaret stuff down at Pangea. So I'm just really, you know, excited to do, to get the brunch back. We're starting Orlando Swim Week with hiTechMODA and Regen Runway. And so Regen is a near and dear topic to me because of the sustainability. And thank you to Fashion Mingle for introducing me to Glenn, who is going to be wonderful to work with on sustainability. She's got like 80 brands. So I'm going to put together a whole package for those brands to come into Regen Runway, hopefully. So we're doing it at the Edison Ballroom, September 10th and 11th, and it's called Lights Up, the Theater of Fashion.
Wonderful. And Dale, what's going on with you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dale Noel. I'm the CEO and founder of True Model Management, and I feel the energy that everyone's feeling, and it's great. New York is coming back as the rest, and I was speaking on a panel about Fashion Week just the other day, and people are talking and want to start booking and asking lots of questions. So it's a great sign. I've got some collaborations going on with D and DCG Media Group, where content creators and designers and boutiques are having pop-up shops or doing photo shoots at the True Model Management Studio on West 37th Street. And Shireen and I have been having discussions about avatars and 3D technology. So I thank you so much for bringing everyone together on Fashion Mingle so we can all work together. I'm looking forward to seeing Catherine at all of her shows. I've been to her Runway The Real Way brunches before, and her and Jackson are phenomenal. So everyone should just check that out, and we should all meet there for our time to get together. So this is great online. I'm looking forward to hearing everything you have to say, Jennifer, today. I know we're going to learn a lot. So feel free to DM me or just reach out to me in the chat or online, and we can talk about collaborations or anything anyone wants to do regarding modeling, advertising, avatars, and
awesome. Yes, and please, for our members that are on Zoom, please feel free to put any questions in the chat. And let me test the chat and make sure that's working. I know I was like, for some reason, 1 week it wasn't. And so now I'm like paranoid about it. So yeah. hopefully it's working. Dee did pass one. I would love for one of our attendees to put something in the chat just so I can make sure it's working. And definitely all of you guys in chat, please feel free to introduce yourselves, share your Instagram, share your websites, tell us what you do, and then post any questions you have for the panel in the chat. And then if you would like to come on to the webinar and ask Jennifer any questions directly about your fashion brand and validating sustainability, just raise your hand and make sure your video is turned on, and I will bring you over to talk to her directly. Okay, because this is a great opportunity for those in the apparel industry to get some really meaty information. So let's go ahead and get started. The chat is working. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, so Jennifer Woodson is a professional textile designer with a passion for sustainable materials and over a decade of experience. She has a company called I'm going to mess it up. JMX Textiles? JMW Textile. That makes sense. Last name W. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jennifer M. Woodson. Duh. Yeah, yeah. Okay. JMW Textiles. And she works with designers to help them negotiate pricing and contract terms for mills, validate sustainability claims, and make sure that the materials the designers need meet the performance and safety standards. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming on today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be presenting about this. It's been a really exciting topic, especially the last year or so with everything that's happened with COVID. I think a lot of people have really jumped on wanting to make a difference. So this is really great timing.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your journey that has gotten you here today. I'd love to know like how you got started in the fashion industry and what led you to create your consulting business with a focus on sustainability.
Yeah, so I did undergrad apparel design and merchandising. And when I was doing that, I took a textiles class, really loved it. Always had a creative side, but also enjoyed getting into that more technical aspect. So wrapped up the undergrad degree and then decided to pursue textiles for my master's. And while I was there, I did my thesis on benchmarking sustainability in the textile industry. So that kind of gave me the beginnings to how to look at these different standards, how to evaluate, really think critically about the different claims that are being made and greenwashing and things like that. So yeah, I loved it. My first job out of grad school, I came out to California. That's where I am now in Orange County. So I had a job in LA, did that for a couple years, and that was in soft goods for hospitality. And since then, I've worked with apparel and automotive, working on materials, developing the materials, or, you know, looking at the sustainability aspects of it, helping to really like justify and make sure that we're making true and honest claims. And after a little while of that, I had been kind of moonlighting and did my own thing for a while. And now I'm doing it on my own. So working as a textile developer, also sourcing. So the sourcing aspect is just someone is telling me what they need. And I'll go out and find that, look for that for them, always based on end use. So I try to look at what are the properties that are required, what kind of claims do you want to make? And then there's the true textile development, where we're just kind of starting something new that maybe doesn't exist or doesn't exist perfectly for what the designer is looking for. So with that, I bring in the sustainability aspect. I've been, you know, in a lot of conversations about what's happening in terms of chemistries and certifications, and, you know, how do we really dig into, is what the mill is telling you accurate? Every mill knows that every designer wants to make a sustainability claim. So that's where you really have to dig in and say, okay, where was this cotton actually grown? Or what kind of dyes are you using? What kind of chemicals? How are you treating your wastewater? So it's all the digging into the details of those questions, and trying to find the meat of the sustainability claims.
Yeah, I've been to so many seminars over the years about and learned so much about how complicated the supply chain is, which is the biggest, you know, barrier to actually creating implementing sustainable practices into your line, because you get like thread could come from one area, dye comes from another area. There's so many different sellers and middlemen. You know, how do you keep all that track of that? And so I know that there are sustainability certifications that these companies can get, and there's ways to test it. Can you give us some background on like what the current state of the industry is from a certification standpoint, and tell us like how it works for a company to get a certification?
Sure. So currently we have at one point there were a lot of certifications. Everybody wanted to be that third-party certifying body, and there's still a ton, but it's kind of filtered out. And so there's some major, pretty well accepted certifications that you can get. And it can start all the way from the fiber. So we have GOTS, which is an organic standard. We have BCI cotton, which is just the way the cotton's grown. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's organic, but they have different practices that can better for the environment and for like the local ecosystem. So that kind of looks at the fiber level. There's GRS, which is a recycling standard, and that will validate that you're receiving recycled materials. Let's say it's recycled polyester. You might want to ask for a GRS certificate. Then there are other certifications that will look at the chemistries being used. So Blue Sign is one, Okie-Tex is another. Those look at, among other things, they look at the chemistries. And so they'll make sure there's no heavy metals. You don't want, you know, something that's going to be toxic in a material that is going to be next to your skin. So looking at the dye stuff, or if there is a chemical finish. So if you apply a topical wicking treatment or a water repellent treatment to your fabric, you want to know what's in it and how that could impact a person who might be wearing it against their skin. So these are pretty reliable. You know, sometimes we do have concerns about whether or not it's forged and how accurate it is, but you can go to the website for most of these, put in the certification number, and validate that it's accurate and up to date, because the mill would need to every year recertify. So it doesn't just last forever. Or if they create a new material, so even based on the yarn, if they have a GRS certificate for recycled polyester, that doesn't mean everything that they create is recycled polyester. So you have to look at the yarn and say, okay, it was this size yarn using this denier of polyester, and okay, yeah, that matches. And so let me go check the certificate, because they could give you an accurate number, but you have to make sure it matches to what you've actually created. So yeah, a lot of these are really a good way to start if you're sourcing materials, or if you're just want to, it's probably one of the easiest ways to say, okay, I want to be able to make a sustainability claim. There's a third party that's already validated this for me. So that's where I'm going to start.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. So let's talk about how the processing of the fiber and the material impacts the sustainability claims of it. What are the things that, would make something clearly not sustainable, but then some processes that mean that the fiber is going to be more sustainable for the collection?
Right. So one of the examples that I always use for this question is looking at bamboo. And it was like over 20 years ago. And for some reason, even today, people still consider bamboo to be a sustainable material. And as a plant, it grows quickly. There's a lot that you can do with it as a construction material. I don't really get into construction, but I've had some conversations around that. That's a different story. But when it comes to making a textile out of bamboo, it is so chemically intensive. So essentially what they do is they break it down with chemicals and re-extrude the fiber. So it's called a regenerated cellulose, which is the same thing as rayon. And I think now legally they might have to say bamboo rayon on the fiber content label. And that process is so toxic that we can't even make it in the United States. It's been banned. So wow. Yeah, so that's where yeah. And I think that that's something that really catches a lot of people off guard, because they're like, oh, it's bamboo, it's a plant and it should be fine. It's like, no, if you want that nice, soft, beautiful bamboo, it's actually rayon. So it's not a sustainable fiber, and we've essentially debunked that.
I got bamboo pajamas for Christmas. So
they're probably really comfortable. And so yeah, because it is, rayon's a really soft material. It'll pill like crazy. Probably in 10 to 20 washings you'll start to notice pilling. But yeah, so if you look at it that way, the chemicals that are used also can't be reclaimed. So there are other processes that are similar where they could reclaim the chemicals that break down the cellulose and use it again. And so you can't do that with the rayon. So
and I know that consumers are like totally, oh, bamboo, this is good for the environment, I'll buy this. I mean, right. I know my daughter is the one who bought them for me, and she bought a pair for me and a pair for my mother. And I know that's exactly what she was excited about, is they were made out of bamboo, and that sounded sustainable.
It does. And it's this green plant, and it it looks nice. It's So that's all. I see where the consumers, and it's unfortunate because it's a product of the greenwashing. And so that's where the industry presented something that really was dishonest and got consumers to buy it. So there are alternatives like Tencel, which is definitely a better material. It's harvested in a different way. It is a wood pulp, so it still is that, cellulosic material, but it can be reclaimed. The chemistries can be reclaimed. I would recommend that over if you want a similar, that nice, soft, flowy rayon type material. Lenzing is the branded supplier of that, and they have multiple Tencels, the one that most people talk about, but they have multiple under their line. So that's the better alternative. And so so that's where it's always asking, like, what did it take to create this material? Yeah,
and Lenzing is a good company to check out. They are they're always involved with Tex World, which is happening in July in New York City. part virtual again, but an in-location event that we're going to be participating in. So we'll share more about that later. But Lindsay does a lot of education during Text World. So definitely check out that company to get more educated on this product. So yeah, let's talk about the greenwashing a bit, because that's such a it's such a trigger word. There's a lot of controversy. Everybody, when you think of greenwashing, you think of H&M because they've gotten a hit a lot about that. But we've had so many good people on Mastermind talking about the sustainable fashion industry, and kind of like, there's trade-offs every company's making. These larger companies are trying to do something, it's better than nothing, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel now that I don't know, the greenwashing term, maybe it's 10 years old now. How do you think the industry is going in terms of greenwashing? Are we getting more fake claims? Or do you think companies are becoming more responsible about what the claims that they're making, and they're truly trying to make a difference?
I think it's a little bit of all of the above. Okay. I do think that companies are trying to be more sustainable. The consumers are demanding it. And so they want to make those claims. They don't want to lose their customer base. But on the same way, are they really digging into where their materials are coming from? And that's a huge task. I mean, it's not something that one person at a company could do. Like, you need a team, and you've got to create that team. So it's not something that'll just magically happen over a couple months. I mean, it'll be years in the making. Sometimes we hear companies saying like, oh, we're going to be 100% sustainable. What does that mean? Like, that's always kind of my response. Like, if you're creating product that has a finite lifespan, then I'm struggling to understand the 100% sustainability claim. So I think there are a lot of other people like me who are asking some of those questions, and you have these watchdog groups and these, just really concerned consumers who are saying no, and they call it out. And so there's fewer places to hide, but I still think that in an effort to stay relevant, we're still seeing a lot of companies make claims that they maybe couldn't justify on paper. Yeah, and it's also what they're being fed by their suppliers. So if your cotton is coming from a place in China that's using forced labor, and you're not doing your due diligence to make sure that that's not happening, then you're at fault for that. You bought that fiber, you bought that cotton product that, so they have to take some responsibility there, and you can't just turn a blind eye. And if it means you have to pay a little bit more, then that's the cost of doing business the right way.
I'd love to bring Shireen in for a second to talk about the legal side of this. I'm wondering, Shireen, if a corporation is saying that they're sustainable and they meet certain guidelines, and maybe they're not, your mic is still off.
Sorry.
And maybe their factory, I mean, obviously complicated supply chains, blah, blah, blah. But if they're making claims of being sustainable, is there any legal jeopardy if they're not actually doing what they say?
Well, I mean, it's a two-pronged issue. The first issue is, I mean, on the consumer-facing side, yes, there may be, because it may be considered false advertising or misrepresentation, and that falls under the realm of the Consumer Protection Act, and what a company can and cannot say that may be considered fraudulent, right? If it's not factual or true. But behind that, the problem is deeper, and we addressed it a few weeks ago when Hillary was on the show, and it has to do with actually more with the guidelines themselves that the government has, which isn't very much. And so they're not clear on what is considered sustainable and what is not. And this gray area is being basically, taken advantage of by a lot of companies that are making these claims that are not necessarily true, as Jennifer pointed out, with the whole bamboo and what people are thinking. What people think on the consumer marketing side is very different from what is the reality, but there's no consistent guidelines as to what does that mean? What does it mean to make a sustainability claim? I mean, I always counsel my clients when they're making marketing claims to be wary of, you know, making false misrepresentations. But the issue is that's sort of on the company themselves to you know, check, to do a self check, because there's really not a lot of outside of these independent governing bodies that could do the you know, the confirmations of where the things are sourced. There's not a lot of legal guidance with what you can say that would be in fact true, because what we don't know is the fact is, you know, sustainability is still a very vague term, and it's not a clearly guided term, and that's why we need legislation to change and update all these things. But it is a very gray area. That doesn't mean that, you know, the company wouldn't get in trouble if they made a claim that the consumer believed to be something which it was not. So you still have to be careful about the misrepresentation. But of course, on the company side, you can always say, well, you know, technically speaking, it still falls within the realm of sustainability because of this or because of that. And, you know, they get away with it, honestly.
Yeah. Gotcha. Jennifer, I know Shireen has worked with a lot of, or she's got a couple of clients that are B Corp certified, which of course is a great way for a brand, because that actually is a certification process. You know, that you have to get renewed every year. Do you have any clients that are B Corp certified?
I'm not currently working with any B Corp, no.
Okay. Well, that's a good way. Shireen, why don't you tell our audience what the B Corps are? And so if you as a brand want to claim, you know, some like a legitimate sustainability standard, then B Corp is a good way to go, isn't it?
Well, I mean, given that there is lack of technical legal standards, the B Lab, which issues the B Corporation, it's an independent third body, but they've come to be, you know, known throughout the world as, you know, the source that everyone would go for the certification. It is a very lengthy process, and it goes through the entire, you know, history of the company and chain of you know, from sourcing to selling. And so what I can say is anyone that is serious about taking their brand to the next level, wanting to get that certification, that can, you know, consumer facing, have somewhere that they can validate, because this independent body does, you know, do a decent job of validating these sustainability claims. Then a B Corp certification is definitely a great way to go, because you're making profit, so you don't have to create a nonprofit in order to actually do good. And that's really a perfect marriage for you know, brands that obviously, you know, want to make revenues, but also want to do good with the products that they're putting out there, and also the communities that they're supporting.
Gotcha. Yeah, Jennifer, there's so many trade-offs a designer has to consider when they're creating a collection for, you know, sourcing the materials. Can you tell us about, let's talk about dyeing, because I mean, I've heard, and I know there's been some movies about it, documentaries about it, about just like how much dyeing is such a huge environmental problem. Can you explain what the problem is and the scale of it? So, and you know, and then tell us what are some more sustainable options in dyeing area?
Yeah, so some of the dyeing issues, it really comes from what's happening in developing nations, where they just dump it out into local waterways and they don't treat the water. So of course, in the United States, we have all kinds of regulations where the water has to be treated and go through all kinds of processes before it could, you know, go back into any type of waterway. And you know, people used to say, like, go to China if you want to know what colors are in trend, look at the river. And that's the truth. So, and unfortunately, it's still happening, even though they might be saying it's not. And that's one of the challenges of even digging into, and unless you can get access to the dyeing and finishing plant and go out and see what's happening, and hopefully you can surprise them, because if they know you're coming, things will change, you know. Yeah, there was a story of someone I worked with before, and he went to a plant and asked for a sample of their wastewater or their effluent, and they brought back this like very, very clear, perfectly clear water, and he was like, yeah, okay, you went to the tap and got it. So and what happens is, not only there's heavy metals to create some of these colors, there's all kinds of just toxic components that can be in there. And then it can also lead to, it takes the oxygen out of the water. So that's where they talk about BOD, that's the biological oxygen demand. And so that's when you end up having things like red tide, because it pulls the oxygen out of the water, it creates algae that takes more oxygen, then the fish essentially can't breathe and they die. So and then you have these like massive algae blooms. So that's one component of where the environmental issue is. But what if we look further back, where is that coming from? Well, if you want to squeeze prices, so you have some, you know, retailers or brands that want to get these rock bottom prices, and the mill wants to get the business, they can't afford to do the water treatment. So it kind of becomes a cyclical issue. And so that's where, as consumers, we really have to say, do I want to pay $2.99 for this t-shirt? It's such a great deal, but well, there's your environmental impact, maybe and maybe not. So that's not always the case, but it is something to consider. And so until we want to truly pay the price of these goods and what it takes to make and create a sustainable good, then we're always going to struggle to get there, because everyone's trying to fight prices. So in the meantime, there are ways, there are chemicals that can be used, there are different processes, there are, Ralph Lauren actually just came out with some PR about there's no wastewater in their new dyeing system, which I haven't looked a whole lot into that, but there are ways that you can dye without using water. You can do solution dyed if it's synthetic. You can have dye stuff that doesn't contain certain materials, or is that more natural? And so it's looking at those things. So our Chroma is a dye stuff that you could ask for and specifically make sure that you're getting a chemistry that is considered more sustainable. And then how it's treated. So what is happening on the back end of that? What do they do with their wastewater? What do they do with the resulting sludge? You know, so those are questions that you can ask, and just looking into alternative options for how a material could be dyed. And that just requires digging, and it's always dependent on the fiber type. So we use different dyes, a cellulosic fiber, which would be like cotton or flax, that's going to use a reactive dye. And if you've got polyester, that's going to use a dispersed dye. So now if you've got a cotton polyester blend, you need both dye types in your bath to you know, get the homogeneous color. So now you've got two components that you have to consider. What are the sustainability issues, and what do I need to add to those? So some of them use a lot of salt to make the dye that goes in the bath. It's not in the dye stuff, but it's an auxiliary component to get the dye on the fiber. So those are all different ways, you know, things to consider. And then I would just really, if someone was out there just trying to find something, I would look into Waterless dyeing, or eDye is a company that does, essentially it's a solution dye. And try and look for different options that way. Digital printing can be a great way to achieve prints. You usually have lower minimums. There's some really good ways to and then there's no water to achieve that. So you kind of have to get creative about what you need, and then again looking at, your end use. And because digital printing, you're going to be limited by your fiber and what the material looks like, how wide it is. And so there's a lot to consider there. But yeah, I think I would just recommend looking at those, looking at alternatives.
Options. I know that we have actually quite a few members here in the United States in the Fashion Meal Directory that do the digital printing. Is dyeing something that you can get done in the United States as well, or is that more something that happens overseas? You can't.
No, you can absolutely have. Yeah, there is textile development and processing can be done soup to nuts here in the States.
Awesome.
And essentially what happens is you go through a converter. So even if you buy from a mill in, you know, XYZ mill from North Carolina, they might be selling it to you, and they maybe made the gray goods, which is the base fabric before anything's done to it, but they might have sent it to a converter and to have it dyed and finished, and then they got it back. So but yeah, that can all happen domestically, and they have really good ways to treat their water and deal with the sludge and everything that comes with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is exciting that we are kind of, it seems like we're getting that part of the apparel industry back a little bit, and it feels like it's really being driven by the sustainability issue because designers want more control, and they want to use American made products. And I would assume that most countries are probably bringing back that local manufacturing too. It's not just the United States, right?
Yeah, the nearshoring is kind of what we're talking a lot about. And I think when we saw this huge disruption in our supply chain with COVID and, you know, China and India pretty much shut down, and that's when people talked more about, okay, let's do nearshoring and bring it back. But with that, then are you prepared to pay the price to have the product done, to pay someone a living wage to create this? Because that's a real point to consider. So I'm completely on board with nearshoring and bringing it back to the States. I just don't know if the rest of America, you know, we like to say we want American made, but are we prepared to pay for it? And
as
that's
a consultant, when you're working with your designers, you know, you have to talk to them about what their budget is for the sourcing. And so tell us a little bit about, like, when you're working with a client, what does the designer need to understand about this, the sourcing process, and you know, if they're like, what kind of differences are there in the budgets from using offshore and American or nearshore type of solutions?
I think the biggest thing is really going to be minimums. And, you know, a lot of times the minimum is 3,000 yards for a standard mill. And if you're a small designer and you just want to do a small collection, you have to consider that. And so in that case, you can still get goods from overseas, but you might not be able to dictate the exact construction, or you might not be able to have your own specific color. You have to choose from what they have available. So you have to, you know, be able to take some of those limitations, and really just knowing also lead time, like understanding that if you want a custom material or if you want something, generally the lead time is 65 days. A material will be quoted as to create the gray goods is usually about 30 to 40 days. And then to dye and finish is another maybe 20 to 30 days. So taking all that into account, then if it's coming from overseas, then you've got shipping time. And if it's on the slow boat, you might spend 30, 60 days on the water. Then it's going to get through the port. So if you do it domestically, you can have it a lot faster. You'll still have your limitations with what you're able to buy and you know, not being able to have your specific you know, well, I like this, but I want it a little heavier. Well, they don't have a heavier option. And, you know, so we have to kind of talk about those things. the budget does come into play, the price per yard. And you can generally get a better price overseas, but if you're shipping it or if you air freight it, it might just become a wash. So that's something to consider, how much you're going to spend. And that's one thing that I do ask when I start working with new clients is, what's your budget for this material? And if they don't know, then we need to start working backwards to figure it out. And they need to understand, okay, my zipper costs this much, my buttons cost this much, and I want to make this much profit margin. So this is what I have left for fabric.
Gotcha.
And that's where we kind of go into it that way.
Let's talk about the finishing options and what do you recommend to make a collection more sustainable?
So for finishing, there's some mechanical finishing that you can have done, which would be fine. So you can do like peaching, sueding, calendaring, and those are all processes that are done essentially with this huge roller brush or like a steel roller. And so those are all great. And then if you want something like a wicking finish, an antimicrobial finish, or any type, like a water repellent finish, then you need to ask for it to be a more sustainable option. So our Chroma they have their traditional water repellent finish, and then they have a more sustainable one, which eliminates some of the chemicals. With that, you might, not necessarily for our Chroma, but sometimes you do lose some of the performance characteristics. So if it's considered a durable finish, it's only expected to last 30 to 35 washes. So maybe if it doesn't have certain components, it might not pass certain levels of testing. And that's something that's actively being worked on by a lot of these chemistry companies, is that, okay, we need it to still meet the standard. It needs to be 1-for-1, and it will be a little bit of an upcharge. So that would just be having conversations. What are the options for applying chemical A versus chemical B? And you'll usually have an upcharge because it does cost more to have a more sustainable chemical. One thing that you can always look at, there are lists online that have, it's called an RSL, and that's the restricted substances list. And many companies and brands will publish theirs. And then there are some that are set out by like governing bodies or like organizations, trade organizations, and just look at what do they not allow? What does Patagonia not allow in their dye stuff, in their chemistries, and follow that. That's a great place to start too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a wonderful tip. Well, tell us about what's a lifestyle assessment. And I know you really feel like it's important for designers and brands to have this. Tell us what it is and why it's important.
Yeah, so a life cycle assessment, or an LCA, looks at the material from start to finish, and you're looking at the fiber, how was it grown, if it's natural, how many gallons of water was used, and pesticides and soil turnover. So it just looks at the entire lifespan of this product and how it has an impact on the environment. Lots of times they put it into as a carbon footprint. And it's important to have something like that so you know where you are in terms of your designs and your sustainability. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's one thing that, you know, I have a couple clients that I work with, and they're like, I want to be 100% sustainable, right? So we get back to that. And then I'm like, well, let's just figure out where we are and get better. And let's understand that, okay, you bought a material stateside, you air freighted it to China. Because textiles are a commodity in China, they charged you a ton of money in tariffs. Then, you know, you had your product created there, you had it air freighted back to the United States. So there's a lot of opportunity to just reduce your carbon footprint by doing some better sourcing.
That's such a great point. The carbon footprint's got to be incredibly huge.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was a learning curve for that person. And so when we look at those things, and you can hire a company to do a really full-blown LCA, and you're going to spend thousands of dollars to do it, but you can also do some rough estimates on your own, and it won't be a perfect, completely comprehensive LCA, but you can even just get an idea, find a calculator online and say, okay, it went from Shenzhen, China to Los Angeles, the port of LA. What's the CO2 footprint, generally speaking, for a plane to make that travel? And then it went from a port of LA to Houston, Texas in a truck. And what's the car? You can find those numbers pretty easily online. So that's always a place to start. And I think knowing where you're at is the biggest thing, because to just say, oh, I want recycled content, or, oh, I want organic cotton. And another example I use with people who ask about this is, well, if your organic cotton was grown in Asia and you're going to have it shipped to North Carolina for processing, or if you have traditionally grown cotton that was grown in Texas, yeah, it uses pesticides, but consider your carbon footprint. So it's not to say one's better than the other or there's any right or wrong, but having that product go over the ocean just to get to North Carolina or wherever it is to be processed, you'll have a lower carbon footprint, possibly, by doing it domestically. So there's always a trade-off, and what seems like the obvious answer, organic, recycled, all these things, maybe isn't the best solution for reducing your carbon footprint.
That's really important. I mean, there's so many different ways to be more sustainable in your collection. I know we've had from the ozone on here several times, and just the 3D sampling is another way of reducing your footprint. And Dale, I know Dale is very involved in the avatar side of fashion, and that's even a way of reducing your footprint, right? With creating avatars.
Absolutely, because with the avatars, they don't need to create as many physical samples, and there's less traveling and waste. So we've been hearing from a lot of clients that, they're feeling very confident that this is a good way to go for the future and to really help our planet. So even if, there's give and take with everything, so you might lose somewhere, but you gain in the better earth, and I'm all for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it speeds up the calendar. You can move.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, much more efficient. Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I know we're going to talk more, I think, about this issue soon. But Dale does provide. Tell us a little bit about what this service that you do provide, so designers and brands can understand how it works.
Sure. Well, at True Model Management, we have a body scanning machine at our office, and we can provide use of our office and the scanner with professionals that can guide them through if they want to have like a pop-up. Sometimes if there's a tailor or some type of business that does custom clothing, it's great because they can find out exactly what their client looks like if they're able to come there and be scanned. Some can use it as an event to bring people and to work with someone like Catherine to learn about shapes and sizing and how the proportions will lend to different styles of clothing choices. And so different people who help with styling and wardrobe. It's a tool, basically. And like tailors and different manufacturers have physical body forms, which we also recommend, and all the best brands and manufacturers work with a live model, a physical form, and an avatar, and they're all tools to get the best fit and to work most efficiently. So everyone still believes to this day you still need to fit final garments and maybe more on a real live body, because the avatars in the physical form can't tell you everything to make it work better. But if you have a fit model or another model that you want an avatar for that you're going to fit on with Clo3D or Optitex or Browseware, any of the softwares, we can provide that. And if you want to have one that's photorealistic, we could start with our avatar and have 3D artists create that for you as well, if you want to use for e-commerce or any type of use that you want a digital asset.
Yeah, I mean, the fit problem, if you are doing all this work to source your textiles, create your collection, you've got this big inventory, but you don't have the fit right. you know, that can be a very huge waste because you're going to have returns or people just not buying the product in the store because it doesn't fit right. So it sounds like having a fit model, extremely important. And I know you actually, Del, you actually started out in modeling as a fit model, didn't you?
I did. I was a fit model for many years. And I even was a fit model as a child and didn't even realize it was a job. My dad owned factories and manufactured women's sportswear. He was a pattern maker. And I used to be, every few years, I seemed to be the perfect size. So when those final samples came in before they went to the stores, I was wearing them.
That's awesome. That's so great. I think that's so important that we give designers more understanding of how important it is to get the right fit, and even depending on what country you're selling in. I know that's a big difference. The sizes are so different.
Absolutely. That's the other thing with the scanning machines. You can also do data collection so you can see who your target market is, or partner you with different companies that provide these studies that they've already done in, in cities and countries, however you need to divide that up, because they've found a lot about the customers since scanning has evolved. And it's awesome. Really, really important. Yeah, if it fits well, it sells well, and you save a lot of money on returns.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, you've given us so much wonderful information. I'm so excited about this. And I know the designers who are watching are really getting a lot of great information. I'd like to bring Dee in because we have talked in the past about the PR side of having a sustainable fashion brand, and it's something that I think we have a point where a lot of people aren't just buying because something's sustainable, but if they like it, it's the right price, and it is sustainable, that's kind of like an add-on that might get people to purchase something you've designed over another brand. Dee, can you give us some tips on promoting your brand as sustainable?
Well, there are magazines, and obviously that's like a buzzword now. People are covering sustainability, sustainable brands. I do think that Jennifer made some really good points that, how is the product made? Like, I had no idea about the rayon mixed with bamboo, because I have fabrics or like t-shirts and stuff that I bought that I had no way of knowing that it was mixed with rayon. So I think that's very important, because if your story is that you're sustainable, blah blah blah, and then that comes out, and then you go on TV or in a magazine saying you're sustainable when this rayon mix is in the mix, you're going to be like, oh, so, it just makes you look bad. So I think from a PR perspective, it's important to know how the product is made. Is it really sustainable? I would ask those kind of questions, and I'm going to start asking those kind of questions, because I think it's important for me as a PR company of what story I'm going to tell to producers or to editors in order to pitch them. So I think that's important if you're going to pitch like to an editor or to a morning show, like, what is your story, and have your story straight, like be integral enough to really put it out there. Like, are you sustainable? And if not, how are you sustainable with other things? Like, for example, the digital print or avatars, that is a sustainable company. So I think also, like, I would also promote I always tell people this, you want to look at, like, I Google a lot of articles that, for example, cover certain topics. And usually what I do is, once I get that list, I will target those editors that cover that topic, and then I will send them a pitch. So I always say that's a good way of finding out who covers sustainability.
So how do you feel like being a sustainable brand would give people an edge in getting media coverage?
It depends on what kind of sustainability you're talking about, right? Like, so there's like Jennifer said, 100% sustainable. Like, really? Are you 100% sustainable? So I also think, like there's a lot of fabrics that are being used now, like hemp or coconut. I think there's like coconut skins or something, like they're using that to make fabrics. And there's some amazing stuff that's being done. Like, I am amazed at what they could do. So it depends. Like, if it's an innovative product, if it's something that's never been done, people like to cover those kind of brands, or how fabrics are made, or how designer collections are made with sustainable fabric. So it depends. It has to be something that people really want to go, wow, I never heard of that, tell me more.
Okay, so something really unique, and Jennifer would certainly be the person to help you position your brand as something truly sustainable, and help you get to a point where it's something that you really do have bragging rights on. So I really encourage everybody to reach out to Jennifer. Before we close, I do have a hand raised by Tara Johnson. Okay, so I was just asking if she wants to be on, but she said no, she doesn't want to be on. So I always have to check. But anyway, Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing this important topic with us, and thank you for becoming a member of Fashion Mingle, because we wouldn't have discovered all this wealth of knowledge without you joining us. And so we really appreciate your time sharing this information. Everybody who's on Facebook Live, or you can go to Facebook Live to actually get a link to this video. It'll also be on YouTube, and we'll be writing a blog article where we'll pull out all of Jennifer's main tips. So definitely, if you're not a member of Fashion Mingle, join at fashionmingle.com so that you can get our weekly newsletter. And every single month we do a topic. The third Friday of the month, we do a topic on sustainability. So you don't want to miss those topics. But we also have marketing. We have the second Friday of the month is marketing. And the fourth Friday of the month is business. And then the first Friday of the month is a open networking session. So we really appreciate everybody joining us today. Once again, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to our panelists for sharing all the great insights from your own areas of expertise. And we will see you next Friday, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.